If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. How many of you this morning are aware of an acquaintance, a neighbor, a co-worker, someone in school? Not a friend, not a relative, but an acquaintance, a neighbor, a co-worker, a friend in school that you would like to get to church. Maybe you know they've stopped coming. Maybe something is going on in their lives and they really could benefit from what's here. If you know a person, a friend, neighbor, acquaintance, co-worker, not a friend, an acquaintance, a neighbor, a co-worker, or somebody in school. If you know somebody like that you'd like to get to church, raise your hand, please. Okay. How many of you have a friend that you would like to bring to church? They've either stopped coming or they've never explored church. How many of you have a friend you'd like to get to church? How many of you have a relative you would like to get to church? Okay. If you put your hand up at least once during those three questions, would you please hold up your hand again and take a look around church and see how many hands are up? Okay, thank you. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. What is it that could have hardened the hearts of those people for whom you put up your hands? Maybe it's life. Life has just been so overwhelming that they have never come or they've stopped coming. Maybe they're angry with God. How can there be a God when this has happened or that has happened? If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Maybe somebody in church has hurt them or offended them. A priest, a deacon, a nun, somebody working for church, somebody in the pew. Something was said or done, and it hurt them, and they've stopped coming. If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. What would you be willing to give? What would you be willing to sacrifice if you could get that person or those people into church? Suppose it was music. Suppose there's a certain type of liturgical music those people would like, and we don't currently play it. Would you be willing to sacrifice the music you like or the music you wish we had if it would bring them into church? If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. What if it was a mass time? What if by rearranging the mass schedule, we could bring those people into church? Would you be willing to sacrifice your mass time? If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. What if it was the church building? What if we had to build a church somewhere else and it would bring all those people in? Would you make that sacrifice? Would you be willing to give up your church building if it would bring those people in? If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. What if it's becoming uncomfortable? A lot of people share that they don't like telling their story. Whatever the reason is that you're here in church this morning, you're willing to make the sacrifice on this beautiful Sunday morning. Oh my goodness, there could be breakfast. There could be the morning paper and a cup of tea or coffee. There could be extra sleep. So many other things that could occupy your Sunday morning. But you've made the sacrifice to be here. You've made that choice, that decision. What if telling that person or those people why you come to church would bring them in? Would you be able to make that sacrifice? Would you give up your comfort and say, look, I have something to share with you, if it would bring them in? If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. What if Jesus were to speak to you and say, I know why you come to church. I thank you for coming. I bless you for coming. But there's a whole other reason to come to church. And I want you to embrace that reason. Could you and would you make the sacrifice of letting go the reason you currently come to church if Jesus were telling you there was a whole new reason for coming? Could you and would you make that sacrifice? If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. My friends, I don't know what's going on, but it's obvious the result. Numbers are diminished. Here in our parish, in our diocese, in our country, throughout the world, the number of people that identify themselves as Catholic and the number of people who practice, come to Mass on a regular basis, participate in the sacraments, there's a great disparity there. It's so disproportionate. Something's got to happen to make a balance. For our Holy Father, Pope Francis, he seems to have heard something. But whether it's for the Pope, for the next bishop of our diocese, or right here in this parish, if Jesus speaks to us, we cannot harden our hearts. If he's saying, look, there are people out there that are lost, disenfranchised, searching, wanting to belong, isn't that the mission of the church? At the end of Matthew's gospel, go out to all the world and tell the good news. In our gospel today, a man approaches Jesus and says, Teacher, tell my brother to give me my share of the inheritance. I want what's mine. And so Jesus goes on to tell a parable, and he says at the end, this man thought he had built up a great storehouse of wealth. But God said to him, you fool, what you have built up is not going to help you. This very night, your life will be demanded. Unfortunately, we can be that way spiritually. We can say, I want my share. My music, my Mass time, my church, my comfort level. I want mine. Jesus, give me mine. Tell that pastor, tell that bishop, tell that pope to give me mine. We have become consumer Catholics. We come to get ours. But that's not the mission of the church. The mission of the church is to give, to go, to seek, to find, to bring in. We need to increase in this. What if everything we've built up is doing no good for the mission of the church? All my prayers, all my devotions, all my whatever, if that's not going for the mission of the church, am I just building up a storehouse that in the end, who's going to benefit? If today I hear his voice, I cannot harden my heart. And what's sad and discouraging is that there are people in church, right here, right now at this moment, that have already tuned me out. They've already hardened their hearts, saying, Father, you're nuts, you're crazy. Don't ask me to give up. Don't ask me to sacrifice. I'm doing everything the right way. Where's everybody then? If we're doing things the right way, where is everybody? We might be doing good, but God calls us to be great. We might be okay, but what about the people outside these walls that aren't? Who's reaching out to them? Who's pulling them in? Who's inviting? Who's ministering out there? I know it can be uncomfortable. Believe me, this is not a comfortable homily to give. I'm outside my comfort zone. But that's why I have to keep listening. I cannot harden my heart to anything that Jesus says to me. And that's my prayer. Lord, give me an open heart. Help me listen and follow. I think that's a message he wants you to hear. That he's going to speak to your heart. And whatever he asks of you, whatever he tells you, if today, you hear his voice. Harden not your heart.